Welcome. Please introduce yourself and tell us the position you're running for and give us a little bit of your background.
Sure. My name is David Bolduc. It's spelled B-O-L-D-U-C, and I am running as a Republican candidate for the Florida House of Representatives in the Naples-based district of District 106. Just to give you a little history of myself, I was born in Maine. I was raised for most of my childhood in Vermont. I went to University of Rhode Island at Brown University, where I studied economics. I was actually a year ahead of current Penn State coach Billy O'Brien. And after graduating from Brown in '91, for the past 21 years, I've worked at various levels of either traditional or reinsurance company day-to-day management, or various levels of investment management and finance.
How long have you lived in Naples?
I've lived in Naples for 2 years now, and essentially 2 years ago, well, for the past 15 years, my wife's parents have lived down here in Naples full time. And 2 years ago, my parents retired up in Vermont, and they came down to Naples. And my wife and I, we have two boys, Trevor, who's 11, and Colin, who's 9. And I grew up, as well as my wife, very close to our sets of grandparents and family. And we thought it was important for our sons to be around their grandparents as they're growing older, be around family. And we made the decision in 2010 to move down, and it's been great so far.
Who do you work for? Who's your employer?
Sure, I work for a company called Bullion Management Group. They're a Canadian-based company, and they specialize in easy and accessible ways to invest in physical gold, silver, and platinum bullion. We only trade or invest in bullion that's traded in the London bullion market. We only deal with one large size exclusive dealer, that's Scotia Makata, which is part of Scotiabank up in Toronto. And in 2002, my firm, they started the world's first open-end mutual fund where 100% of the assets are physical gold, silver, and platinum, and they're all stored at Scotiabank's main vault in Toronto. And we have, whenever we purchase a bar, we receive the title and the deed to every bar. So, we saw some problems with the mortgage scenario where, titles and were going in different places. We hold on to every title, so
there's no secondary mortgage? Exactly.
I mean, God forbid if Scotiabank happened to go bankrupt, we hold the title to every bar. So we walk into that vault and we say every one of these bars is ours. So that's an open-ended mutual fund, and I found that very interesting because here in the U.S. you cannot have an open-ended mutual fund with more than 20% of your assets being physical gold, silver, and platinum. It has, the other 80%, if you want to invest in gold, has to be some type of paper gold, futures or things of that nature, ETFs. We've recently established a relationship with a trust company, a Nevada-based trust company. So our fund can be offered via this trust in Nevada to qualified retirement plans. So now it can be offered to define benefit plans, and more importantly, it can be available to define contribution plans. So,
does Bullion Management have an office in Naples?
No,
okay,
I essentially am the office. Yeah,
you
exactly.
Can work
anywhere. Exactly.
Is your wife employed?
No, she's a homemaker. We kind of have a little bit of a running joke where when we were living in Massachusetts, she was getting her MBA at Babson College, and right as she was about to graduate, became pregnant with our oldest boy, Trevor, and so she got her MBA and kind of hasn't worked a day in her life since. So we kind of have a little running joke with that.
So let me get this right. Bullion Management Group is based in Toronto?
Yes, Markham actually, which is a suburb of Toronto. And we do...
and what do you do?
Essentially relationship management, sales. I contact either institutional clients
in Naples?
Whether it be Florida or across the country. I've had discussions with the Florida State Board of Administration, as far as their pension, because it's starting to get more looking at I guess, investing in physical bullion is getting more of an institutional flair to it. A highly respected investor, Kyle Bass, he sits on the board of the University of Texas Teachers investment management company. He recently made the push to, and they did, in fact, purchase about $1 billion worth of physical
And they
gold.
have to do that through the state of Nevada?
No,
I
they
didn't
don't have.
understand. Okay.
No. See, when you have an institutional investor, like a highly qualified institutional investor, they can buy it directly from Bullion Management Group. But when it's a qualified retirement plan,
Yes.
then it's accessed through the trust company in Nevada.
Okay.
So you travel a lot, or can you do this online?
I travel, a fair amount, but you can do a lot online as well. Essentially, it's just follow-up information, things of that nature. But I do like to travel. I do like the face-to-face meetings. I think that's the best way to earn people's trust and to really answer their questions. So whenever I can, let's say, get the meeting, I do like to get on the road and meet with them.
Thank you. Could I ask why you're running for this seat at this time, and why why this job at this time?
Sure. Essentially, I am, as I mentioned, I have two boys, 11 and 9, and I'm deeply concerned with the state of the economy going forward, both, I guess, for all of us and what the economy is going to look like when they get older. With the U.S., we're quickly approaching $16 trillion in national debt. The top 5 banks in the U.S. Are allowed to hold, because they are unregulated, they're allowed to hold or have created over $220 trillion of derivatives. And if you collectively take that portfolio, all it would take is a 7% loss in that $220 trillion, and that equals the economy of the United States in 1 year. So I feel very strongly that the economic and banking crisis that we see in Europe is going to show up on the shores of the U.S. in the near future. I don't know exactly when, but I do feel it is a certainty that we will have another banking crisis, banking-led crisis. And as we saw in 2008, Florida's economy was completely vulnerable to a banking crisis. AIG and Lehman Brothers went down, kind of locked up all the bank credit in the system. There was no more lending. In fact, I had a good friend who was the chief financial officer for Bryant University in Rhode Island, and he contacted his lead bank, which was Bank of America, in late September 2008, and he said, we have some dorms that we're trying to finish. We have some other projects that we'd like to finish. I'd like to draw on, our line of credit. Let's get things going again. And his representative said, call me back in April. We're not loaning to anybody. So it just freezed up the whole system. And when that was frozen, like I said, Florida's economy, it was vulnerable to that as well. You saw foreclosures, you saw unemployment, both skyrocket. So why I decided to run now is
For this seat.
For this seat is because I think we can offer state-level solutions to insulate ourselves to the next banking crisis, banking and debt crisis.
What would some of those be?
Sure. Essentially, the two main ones, and they're to protect to the two levels or the two ways which a crisis could go. It could go incredibly deflationary, like we saw in 2008, where liquidity and bank credits withdrawn from the system. They call in loans, so essentially the volume of money in the economy is withdrawn quite a bit. So to counteract that, I look to, in 2008, was there a state in the U.S. that was able to withstand that economic crisis? And there was only one state that did, and that was North Dakota. North Dakota is the only state since 2008 that continuously added jobs every year. They're the only state that continuously had a budget surplus every year. They currently have the lowest unemployment rate in the country at 3%. They have the lowest foreclosure rate. They have the lowest credit card default rate. So, and some people who are familiar with the economy in North Dakota might say, yeah, but they're blessed with oil. Yeah, they have oil in the western part of the state at the Bakken Oil Reserve. But if you look to other states that have more oil than North Dakota, let's say Texas or Alaska, They have much more oil than North Dakota, and their unemployment rate is more than double that of North Dakota. In fact, the Bakken Oil Reserve is shared by Montana, and actually Montana extracts more oil from the Bakken Oil Reserve than North Dakota, and their unemployment rate is double that of North Dakota. So
what's North Dakota doing right?
So their secret weapon is, I feel, is they're the only state in the country to own their own state bank, and it's called the Bank of North Dakota. It's 93 years old. It was established in 1919 for many of the same reasons I'd like to establish a Bank of Florida today, where they were looking to escape the clutches of out-of-state bankers who were withdrawing credit from the farmers. They were saying, okay, you're going to pay exorbitant fees for futures contracts, things of that nature. You're going to pay a lot more for your seed, things of that nature. So what they did is they said, look, we would be better served rather than our money going to out-of-state bankers. Why don't we collectively keep the money in the state, and then that way we have more control on banking and credit. So the way it works is all state and agency revenues are in North Dakota are deposited into the Bank of North Dakota. So currently Florida has a budget of $70 billion. Theoretically, you could have $70 billion of revenues rather than being deposited in the large Wall Street bank. It's deposited in the Bank of Florida, and because when you're incorporated as a bank, banks are the only, I guess, financial entities in the world that can create additional loans, create money, so to speak, on top of their deposit base. So that's what the Bank of North Dakota does, and they do not do any direct lending. That's what I think the beauty of this model is. They still let the private market determine what's the best place to, I guess, loan into the economy and kind of jumpstart businesses. And they don't. It's not using tax dollars. They're not using tax dollars either as a tax credit, or they're not saying, okay, here's our tax dollars. We'd like to, give you a loan, but it's based on our tax dollars. It's bank credit that they created on top of a deposit base. So what they do is all of their loans are. What they do is they partner with small to mid-sized banks in the state. So you have a set of underwriters at the small, mid-sized bank. They know their market. They know probably the person that is requesting the loan, personally. And then what oftentimes the small to mid-sized bank might say, we're not large enough maybe for the type of loan that this person's looking for or this company's looking for. So the small to mid-sized bank partners with the Bank of North Dakota. They provide them the extra credit, to offer larger loans, larger credit. And so if you look at it, 72% of all banking in North Dakota is done by small to mid-sized banks. It's really essentially the economic engine that made America great, in the 1800s. This is why we surpassed England and France and all the other economies in the world in the 1800s. It was small, mid-sized banking to small, mid-sized businesses, creating more of a middle class.
Is it the only state?
Yeah, the only state.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
But they also, North Dakota, population-wise, and very small.
Mm-hmm.
Florida could do the same thing. There wouldn't be a.
They could, and in fact, on my website at the end, when I devote a full page to it, and my last line of it, I said Florida can create the same job creating, small business creating, small banking economy, just like North Dakota, just 40 degrees warmer. Yeah. I mean, that's essentially the only difference. There's nothing from stopping us from saying, this is a 93-year-old model. It's been through various cycles of recessions or depressions and inflationary
Does your
periods.
website explain how it's governed in North Dakota?
I don't get into the governance structure as much, but they basically have an advisory board where it's the governor of the state,
Okay.
the attorney general, the head of agriculture, things like that. But the bank is run day to day by bankers, and
I would put my money in it.
not you necessarily individually.
Okay.
The state does. So all tax receipts that they receive,
State pensions?
not state pensions,
Because
but
they would have been best outside.
maybe some the revenues from when they're
Sales
collecting money from, you know,
Sales
for
tax.
citizens insurance, sales
Citizens
tax,
insurance.
you know, collecting money from citizens insurance, collecting money from the, you know, the Florida Hurricane Catastrophe Fund, what I call the CAT Fund. And that's the other thing too. It's like, you know, it has a lot of applications.
Would it be liable for any debts?
No, see, that's the thing. You could use, so let's just say,
Well, you mentioned citizens.
right, so.
Hurricane season's coming.
Exactly. So, not only is the state bank, I feel, incredibly versatile in terms of, you know, creating jobs, creating small business, you know, enhancing the middle class, but it can be used in other areas to really help out the overall finances of the state. I think one piece of that would be, you know, citizens and the CAT Fund, where right now, you know, those assets are invested in short-term bonds, let's say. And they're probably held at a Wall Street, you know, big Wall Street bank. So you rather than keep it at a Wall Street bank, you just deposit it in the State Bank of Florida. You don't have to change the investment structure. It's still, you know, short-term fixed income. It's just held at, you know, as a deposit at the Bank of Florida. And then let's, you know, and collectively their assets between the CAT Fund and Citizens are about $25.4 billion. So let's say, God forbid, we did have, you know, another Hurricane Andrew. You know, I think the estimated cost of it, you know, if Andrew hit with $2012 would be about $40 billion. So in that case, you'd have, okay, the first $25 billion is gone. You know, it's going to eat, you know, get into all the, you know, the reserves of Citizens. It's going to get into all the reserves of the catastrophe fund. And if that were the case, and we didn't have the State Bank of Florida, that would probably trigger the largest tax increase in Florida's history, because we say we got to recapitalize this. But when you deposit it in the State Bank of Florida, you double your potential rebuilding capacity. So there's $25.4 billion deposited in the State Bank of Florida. You have, on top of, you know, that deposit base, you can create another $25.4 billion of loans. So let's say we went through that $25 billion, the next $15 billion, you could immediately go in there and, you know, inject it to, you know, homeowners, businesses, you know, to clean up, to start building quickly. And then the beauty of that is, again, it's not tax dollars that, you know, that are going out the door. It's not an insurance premium or claim that's going to go out the door and you'll never see it again. But it's going to be, you know, a loan at, let's say, low interest, you know, so that the people can pay it back over time. But all that principal and interest is paid back to the state. So that money doesn't get, you know, siphoned off to Wall Street. It stays within the state. And in fact, North Dakota has the Bank of North Dakota has a history of really partnering well with the state during disasters. In '97, when they had the Red River flood, they immediately stepped in. They didn't wait for FEMA. They immediately stepped in with a $25 million loan to the city of Grand Forks, a $12 million loan to the University of North Dakota, which is in Grand Forks, and they quickly started rebuilding. And from that, they only lost 2% of their population. You know, so they were able to rebuild quickly. If you look at the sister city on the other side of the river in Minnesota, East Grand Forks, they were impacted much more greatly. They lost a lot more of their population because they had to wait for FEMA, you know, to come in there and process everything and take their time and all that.
And why don't more states do it?
You know, I think that's a great question, and it's really started to, the interest in it has really started to pick up, especially since 2008, because people see how well North Dakota's weathered, you know, that financial crisis. And currently there's about 17 states, I think it's actually 18 now, that have either filed legislation to create a state bank on its own, or at least fund a feasibility study. You know, that's okay, you know, but I feel, you know, we have a model that's been running for 93 years. I don't know how much, you know, in fact, Massachusetts, they funded a feasibility study, and then they had the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston kind of be the overseer of it. Well, of course they're going to come back and say, no, this is not a good model, because this is, you know, it's technically outside of the Federal Reserve system, you know, and they're providing the credit rather than, you know, the banks that own all of the stock of the Federal Reserve banks, which are the same 5 Wall Street banks essentially that we've bailed out.
Have you ever met Governor Scott?
You know, I've met him in quickly and informally at Food and Thought.
Yeah.
He was there and with his Saturday morning breakfast or what have you, and
Yeah.
I just saw him, said a quick hi to him. You know, I like a lot of his plans, and I think his plans for job creation. I think, you know, the state bank, the way it can be, you know, laid out to him, I think he would seriously consider it, and I think, you know, he would analyze it and say, you know, I do feel this is a good model and something that could definitely help the state create jobs and insulate ourselves from, you know, a banking or economic crisis.
So you mentioned that you would insulate the state in two ways.
Right.
One you just described. What's
Exactly. So the first piece is if, you know, we have a deflationary scenario. The second piece is what if we have, you know, a high inflationary scenario where, let's just say, you know, that, like I said, you know, the top 5 banks in the U.S. have $220 trillion derivatives. Let's just say there's a large, you know, very good sized loss in that, and that, you know, the U.S. dollar is the world's reserve currency. So, you know, essentially every central bank has to keep a lot of U.S. dollars in reserve. If they collectively all at once lose faith in the U.S. dollar, you know, let's just say, you know, the banks, in order to bail them out this time, I mean, we've already, through the audit, the Bernie Sanders audit essentially, the Federal Reserve provided $16 trillion to, you know, Wall Street banks from 2007 to 2010, is, you know, for the bailout. So let's just say they go back. J.P. Morgan alone has about $80 trillion derivatives. I mean, if they take a, you know, $40 trillion hit, is the Federal Reserve is going to come in and say, yeah, we're going to try and make you whole here so you don't go down? If that's the case, other, you know, central banks around the world might say, geez, I don't have a lot of faith in the value of the U.S. dollar. I'm going to flood the market and sell it. And, you know, that's going to quickly, very quickly drive down, you know, the value of the dollar. So you could have, you know, a hyperinflationary scenario. So how do you protect yourself against that? And this is, again, Florida wouldn't be the first state to do it if we were to do it. And I call it the Florida Legal Tender Act, essentially. And it's to recognize federally issued gold and silver coins as legal tender, essentially as a complementary currency to the Federal Reserve notes, you know, we have in our pocket. And, you know, for thousands of years, gold and silver has been, you know, recognized as money.
Right.
So I think there's no reason why we could, you know, shouldn't say, you know, recognize. Utah's done it. They've passed the Utah Legal Tender Act. They recognize gold and silver coins, so you can use it to pay your taxes. You know, let's say, you know, the value of the dollar goes down quite a bit. You know, since the Federal Reserve was, you know, came into place in 1913, the purchasing power of the U.S. dollar has gone down by 98.5%. So, you know, it's not, you know, having gold and silver coins in the hands of the people, not in, you know, with the banks, in the hands of the people, it can protect themselves not only from, you know, potential hyperinflationary scenario, but it protects you from, you know, slow, steady inflation, you know, over a long period of time. It's interesting to look at, but the price of an ounce of gold from 1913 was about $19 an ounce. Now it's, you know, closer to $1,600. So if you kind of plotted the two, you know, the value of the dollar is going down by, you know, this much. Gold's, you know, gone up in value by the same amount because it takes so many more dollars to buy that ounce of gold.
Is that practical though? Doesn't McDonald's have to have two menus? One for if you pay in paper currency, and one if you pay in coins. Doesn't the coin one change every other day as the price of gold fluctuates?
I do think it's practical, and I do like one item that the Utah bill had, where no one's forced to accept it as, you know, legal tender, but at least it is recognized as legal tender. So, you know, let's just say you have, you know, a store like a Food and Thought or something, and, you know, hey, you know, the dollar's, you know, having a little bit of a crisis here, or can't buy as much, and yeah, I'll, you know, exchange it, you know, and I think silver is actually more practical. You know, it's smaller smaller amounts, and, you know, every U.S. coin pre-1964 was 90% silver. So, I mean, you could, you know, bring those coins back into circulation, and, you know, that's how you would provide change to people and things of that nature. So it's just having something that is insurance, essentially from banks losing control of, the value of our dollar.
Did we get your age?
I'm 44. As of today, it's my birthday.
Oh.
Good. Is this your first run in public office?
It is. It is.
How do you size up the job being done by the incumbent?
Well, I think I'm running because I feel I can do a better job than the incumbent, and especially on the economic levels, where my, I guess, ideas or what I'd like to propose are proactive to potential economic crises, where I feel the incumbents' proposed legislation have been reactive to the economic crises, and with mine, they're I think to ensure or benefit the people, protect their wealth, protect the value of their, like I said, State Bank of Florida State Bank of North Dakota, or North Dakota has the lowest foreclosure rate. You have lower foreclosures, that keeps the value of everyone's property high. Where I feel some of the economic legislation of the incumbent has been rewarding the banks rather than, let's say, looking for ways to protect the people.
Rewarding the banks?
Yeah.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
And some of the banks would probably take issue with that. She would tell you that she's trying to get the banks moving. I
see that argument, but the way I look at it is the banks, prior to from the founding of our country to 1997, the banks had to continuously always keep track of the original promissory notes to any mortgage, and then so when they and it had to be filed with the county. County had recording fees, things of that nature. And then if it was transferred to, let's say, another entity, it was always, okay, refiled, it's officially transferred. What they call the wet ink promissory note, you see the original signature. In 97, what the banks did, no law, just out of law, they created the mortgage electronic registry system, MERS, so they could essentially quickly slice and dice mortgages into a different trusts. To take one more, and they are on record as doing this, taking different mortgages, or taking one mortgage and slicing it into this mortgage security trust, slicing it into another, slicing it into another. So technically, the wet ink promissory note never followed into the trust. So the trusts now are, the mortgage security trust, they're backed by nothing. They don't have the original mortgages. They can't. There's no record of it. And that's very problematic, and that's going to be very problematic down the road. And also, every time the MERS, moved a promissory note or mortgage, that it was never filed with the county. So counties in Florida were essentially cheated out of millions of recording fee revenue. And like I said, this was an entity that was created out of law. A number, there's been counties have sued the banks over MERS, states have sued, over MERS. So looking for ways to make it easier for them to, let's say, process a foreclosure on with a photocopy of the original wet ink promissory note is something we didn't do. That wasn't law for 200 years, essentially, hundreds of years, and then the banks just decided to do it that way. And I think that if you're able to do that, that's just rewarding bad behavior by the banks.
You mentioned you have a background in insurance.
Mm-hmm.
What needs to be done with the citizens on the state level?
Well, it was intended as the insurer of last resort, and I think the state, a lot of the bigger insurance companies it's set up an environment where they could cherry pick a little bit So there's been, I think, what is there, 1.5 million policies now underwritten by citizens. That number's got to get a lot lower. And then also, from what I understand, is the state, the insurance companies that are writing in Florida, they essentially, they don't say, okay, we have this pool of properties that we're insuring and we're going to set our rates nationally. I mean, North Dakota's not having hurricanes, but if you, let's say State Farm, for instance, policies all across the country, the way they, I guess, set rates here in Florida is they just say, we have a, set of homeowners in Florida, and that's it. Mm-hmm. And that's going to be, what we're going to set our rates. They're a national company. And what they should do is say, okay, we have all these homeowners throughout the country. We should set our rates based on the potential loss of everyone, all the policies that we're writing across the country. And I think we should also look to, the reinsurance market as potential ways to, insulate ourselves, depending on, Zurich, Munich, the big companies in Bermuda. I think, if there is a way to say, look, if we're exposed to by $3 to $5 billion, is there a way to maybe take some of that 8 billion that we've collected so far and buy some additional reinsurance to mitigate that exposure? Yeah.
David, we're out of time.
Yeah.
But thank you for yours.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.